Hello and welcome to the award-winning Bowie Youth Showcase. On today's show, we will speak with social entrepreneur Maka Taylor. We will discuss her research on socioeconomic disparity among African Americans, high incarceration rates for racial and ethnic minorities, and why we should have conversations about race. Later in the show, we will be featuring a new addition to the Bowie Youth Showcase, the Bowie Youth Showcase News. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Bowie Youth Showcase. I'm your host, Kashara Clay. Today we're speaking with Maka Taylor, a woman with a vast understanding of generational, institutional, systemic marginalization, a woman who uses the art of discourse to provoke, inspire, and receive. A self-taught, non-linear learner, a multifaceted individual. She's brilliant. Even with all these traits, she is still exhausted from being Black. Please welcome Maka Taylor.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
The first thing I would like to know is, what is a social entrepreneur?
So a social entrepreneur is someone like myself who leverages work and resources to try to affect social change in a positive manner.
Okay, could you give me some examples of, do you use social media?
Absolutely, okay. So that the work, you know, it's unpaid, yes. So I'm definitely a civil servant.
Okay.
So it involves social media and politics changes on a regular basis, and what happens with us in the media changes on a regular basis. So my focus could be anywhere from something with Benghazi and Clinton to something like a Michael Brown. Okay. So I just work to stay abreast of what's going on in current events and put my voice in and those who I feel as though I represent.
Is research a large part of your
research is a huge part, and so I pull information from all types of different sources. It may be magazine, it may be a Daily Express, it may be a global snippet. So information comes and is given through social media.
Could you please explain to our viewers what racial disparity is and how it affects people of color?
Well, racial disparity is the numbers, if you would, statistics. And if you look statistically, African Americans are at the bottom of the barrel across the board. So that in and of itself is the disparity, but specifically 60% incarceration rate for ethnic minorities and African Americans, with the large portion, of course, being African American. And when you put that in contrast to our numbers demographically across the nation, it's a large divide between those of color and those who don't have it.
Okay. You started a project this year, and it was the Campaign to Conquer the Disparity/Race Talks in 2015. And what's the purpose of this campaign?
So the campaign it's an educational impetus, if you would. The goal is to open up the conversation about race. And because race is so sensitive, I just approached it the best way that I could. And so what I would like to see is open panel discussions, some forums, and that's actually already been started. When I started this work about 1.5 years ago or so. And so since then, the momentum has been picking up. I've definitely seen more things happening. The National League of Cities actually held an Undoing Racism forum. So the concept is moving, and the purpose is education, moving towards solving this enigma that seems like it's not really that difficult.
Why do you think race is such a sensitive topic?
I think that race is a sensitive topic because all facets have learned to live with it. It's kind of like the elephant in the room. So we all know it exists, but if we give the right, words, or we say the right colloquialism, then it'll just go away. I have white friends, or no, some of my closest friends are Black. But the reality that Blacks live, myself first and foremost, being a parent, a Black woman, that reality is very real. And I found that my counterparts may not understand it in the same manner. So as opposed to becoming angry or taking that route, I chose to take a proactive role and begin to work towards educating my counterparts on what that experience is and what those differences and variations can be.
What steps would you take to ensure that this project comes to light?
Well, I've definitely I'm starting my own program actually that is going to train Black men to kind of be able to tell their own story. And hopefully that in and of itself will take on its own life with that conversation of them being able to actually have that, because for me, like, I don't have a problem talking about it, but others do. So the first goal is to get us as Black people comfortable talking about it. So I think that that starts with sacred healing circles that allow us to share our own thoughts, our own experiences, and to really process that in a safe place. And to then be able to move out into our communities and in our effective workplaces and our effective socializations, that we can then begin to open these conversations up everywhere. But I would like to continue to see panels such as National League of Cities did and other, just on whatever scale we can, small, medium, and large. It's really an all hands on deck project.
In your executive summary, you state there is a larger conversation required to begin to address the systemic and institutional marginalization of people of color in the U.S. and abroad. And what made you realize that this was a conversation that needed to happen?
Well, my experience, I've been in I live in Washington, D.C., and I've been there for about 8 years, and I had never felt the weight of my color, despite where I had been in the world, the way that I did in Washington, D.C. So it caused me to begin to look at it from a different scope. And what I learned is that I had become kind of comfortable with the racism, and I understood that I lived within it, but I guess that I chose not to be complacent anymore. And so I was working on myself, and through self-development, I came to a concept that I felt like would be beneficial for all of us. So for me, it is about just really connecting with the self and making sure that I know how to articulate and speak in a fashion that allows myself to be heard.
How do we start this conversation?
We started with ourselves first. Again, that's what it started with me learning who I was and knowing that if I could think this about us, or if I could say this about us, I could only imagine what my counterparts would say. And so that caused me to have to go into a full conversation with myself that what do I want to address? So once I dealt with my own insecurities, I was able to then sit down across the table from my counterparts and say, well, this was my experience, this is what happened, and this is what I'm looking for moving forward.
And why is it important to discuss racial issues?
Again, as a Black woman and as a parent, I have a 13-year-old son, so seeing what happened to Mike Brown, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm actually 63135 is my home zip code. So that touched me personally. And looking at my son, I could no longer live within that schizophrenia of the generational, institutional, systemic marginalization that you spoke about earlier, that ongoing process of these conditions that we particularly live in that seem to have not been properly addressed, so that we can clear that and have a clean slate from which to work from, where my color doesn't dictate these life and livelihood, fashions that I live.
Going back to conversations about race, MTV aired a documentary called White People, and it was directed by journalist Jose Antonio Vargas, and he talks to panels about race and how it affects them. He wants to know their opinions. One topic that came up in particular was white privilege. So what is white privilege? White
privilege is the complexion for the protection, as Paul Mooney would call it. It's something that Black people will never have an understanding of. Let me say at this point, because they have an advantage, I guess, if you would. And please excuse me, being politically correct may not be, I don't know, this conversation is new, but white people definitely have an ability to live their life without being judged by their color. Black people don't have that. So that would be an initial thought I would give to privilege. Privilege would also be the fact that their opportunities are kind of inherent because they have certain systems in place in their families and whatnot that we really don't have the opportunity to have, because our whole thing is survival and everything comes down to money and how we're going to do that. So that changes the mindset of a parent. And so when you just put the mindset of a parent, especially like I said, being from Southeast DC or living there now, you're at 76% single mother homes, and you put that against whatever our counterparts is, but it's just not a balance is the basic thing. It just doesn't balance out.
So you were not only able to relate to a single mother, regardless of color, do you feel that you have everything stacked against you?
To some extent, I do. Let me say that my solace is that I know myself, and I'm able to place myself in positions, but that's only because I choose to be different. But if you were to have someone else who were in my same demographic, technically, it would be a completely different situation, because they may not know how to advocate for themselves. They may not know what phone numbers to dial. They may not know how to even mentally pick yourself up out of one place to feel like you can move to the next. So when we're talking about cards being stacked against, not only that is it for me, but for my mother and what she showed me, all that she had to give, and that still wasn't enough to get me through so that I could become the college or whatever the track is. We don't get that track. We have to figure it out from pieces. We don't have a fast track or a trajectory. Our thing is get it how you live, which is how you come into these socioeconomic differences that we experience.
Okay. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
It's 3 p.m. For 50 million kids across America, school's out. And for a third of these kids, they're out on their own. Out with nowhere to go and nothing to do. But every afternoon is a chance to change America's future. All you have to do is open the door. It's time to support the Boys and Girls Clubs. Great futures start here.
Welcome back. If you had just joined us, we are speaking with social entrepreneur Maka Taylor, who is encouraging people to talk about race. Maka has been able to prove that African Americans, as well as other people of color, face socioeconomic disadvantages in the United States. Through her research, she has been able to show that high incarceration rates among African Americans has been the crux of disparity among blacks. Ms. Taylor has given our community a way to combat these issues through her campaign to conquer racial disparity. So, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
So, with your research involving African Americans in jail, how were you able to come to that? And I read in your executive summary that you got that research through the Sentencing Project. So what is the Sentencing Project?
So the Sentencing Project is a nonprofit that was started in 1986, and I found it during my research, so I'm not personally connected to it, but the research was so compelling, and empiric data is required when you begin speaking on topics such as this. So I located that information creating the campaign to fight the disparity. And they educate lawyers, so like your PDs and whatnot. They educate them on advocating for their clients, because there is a certain system in place that maintains the systemic incarceration of the demographic that we're speaking about.
You found that 60% of people in prison are ethnic minorities. Why is this the crux of disparity?
Well, if you take, a whole demographic out, it has to affect something. And of course, I openly admit that I am biased, being a black woman who has a child by someone who was incarcerated, being a black woman who has friends and family who have been incarcerated. And as I stated earlier, it is the generational institutional systemic marginalization, because you can look at something and not be able to really see what it is. So let's take, if I'm a mom and I need to get something for my children, I don't have the money, I don't have family, I go and steal. So then if I get arrested for stealing, I'm now in a system, my children are now in a system, and then that continues to perpetuate. So when we talk about that, we have to look at that more intelligently to ask, are we really criminals, or is there a system in place that creates criminal behavior as a result of what we're experiencing while being Black?
What is the correlation between African Americans having a low socioeconomic status and a high incarceration rate?
Again, I'm going to use the same reference I used earlier. If we're talking about people who have to make decisions, I call them gangster decisions. And sometimes my gangster decision ain't yours. So I may do something that is technically against the law. And if I get caught, then I'm adding to this justice thing, but I'm also adding to the degradation of the Black family one way or the other, but all I was really trying to do was survive. So if we could deal with the fact that we're talking about a people who are working to survive, and they're being criminalized as an aspect of that, so then socioeconomically we become crippled because the community is now missing individuals that will serve certain purposes, and the system continues to perpetuate because we don't have enough foundation to hold up the community.
Aside from high incarceration rates, what other factors contribute to African Americans having a low socioeconomic status?
My theory, Kashara, and it's all hands on deck environment, this is just Maka Taylor's theory. I think that based on a lack of heritage, based on a lack of understanding of who we are, see, every other culture has a place that they can call home. We know Africa to be home, but we may not want to readily accept that. And just to boot, even in the Smithsonian, the African Art Museum, on the wall, it says that at the core of everyone's being is Africa, everyone's. And I actually called the curator and asked, how doesn't that translate to society? But that's another conversation. But our lack of security on the inside causes us to create false senses of security on the outside. So we will do everything to make pretty and comfortable that which is still a living hell. And that's why we sit across from one another right now, because there is a living hell that can be experienced while living while Black, one way or the other. And one hell may not be as dire as the other, but to whatever extent, to know that your color dictates, and that can never be removed. I can never take my color off. I can never lighten myself enough to remove this. And so to know that creates environments and behaviors that are typically counterproductive, because I'm not looking to feel something with purpose, I'm just looking to fill a void with a feeling.
You said that there's a cycle that continues. You have the parents that grew up in a broken home, that parent raises their children, they have a broken home, that cycle goes on and on. How do we break that cycle?
So again, Maka definitely does not have all the answers. Maka is raising her family as she's sharing this advice, and that would be my first statement. Following that up, my daughters, I have twin 5-year-olds and a 13-year-old son. And the only way that I can say it right now is I make them keenly aware that there is a difference. I don't work to impart any bias with that, but I do work to make them know that there's a difference. And I teach them that, so here's the kicker, this is what we say. I say, what's wrong? They say, white supremacy trying to oppress me. I say, well, what's the solution? They say, to love myself, to find my land, and to learn my ancient heritage. And for me and my family, that's our starter. So that's our foundation. We take in everything African that we can. We work to understand who we are. We don't have it all. We're working to figure it out. But the key for us was embracing our Africanness and understanding that that is a vital aspect of our security.
One topic that I want to touch on, we have seen an increase in police brutality and police shootings, and it seems that after Michael Brown's death, there was a start of the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you know why his death in particular sparked that movement?
Well, that's a great question, Kashara. And again, in my humble opinion, I think that social media had a great deal to do with it, which is why it is a great tool and resource for getting the word out and helping to cause people to become aware. I think that all people seeing that boy, that was a son, lay in the street for 4 hours plus, and the way he was treated after that, I think it brought to the forefront, in the same manner as Emmett Till 40, 50 years ago, brought to the forefront the reality of what we're dealing with. And at the point somebody's son can be murdered in cold blood, in daylight, with witnesses to some extent, and nobody is held accountable, it made it very real, that which had been hidden or at least sugar-coated for so long.
Do you think that there will ever be progress towards racial equality?
Call me an optimist. I absolutely do. Like I said, when I first started this work, it took a long time for me to get comfortable. But I think about somebody who doesn't know that he's my mentor, but Tim Wise. And he has a theory, and I actually met him at the National League of Cities event. But when I think about what they must have thought of him when he started, I'm glad that I carried on, because I do have hope. I have hope because I know that whatever created all of us is beautiful, big, and a both and whatever it is. And so I believe that once people can again remove their insecurity, see, if fear reaches fear, then nothing can come from that. But when strength reaches strength, we sharpen one another. So I truly believe that through proper demeanor and true desire to have the conversation, that we can absolutely move to the point. Now, how long it's going to take, I don't know. But can it happen? I do believe that.
Thank you so much, Maka. Thank you, Maka, for being a guest on the Bowie Youth Showcase and for encouraging our viewers to talk about race. When we return, we will bring you the Bowie Youth Showcase news.
Thank you, Kashara. Thank you.
No.
Good day. Welcome to the news segment of the award-winning Bowie Youth Showcase called BYSN, Bowie Youth Showcase News. I am Paige Dews, and I will be reporting to you news and issues in and around Bowie and surrounding areas. One of the first issues I would like to talk to you about is bullying. To help discuss the issue is the author of Bully Me No More, Miss Damona Daniels. Before we get started with Miss Daniels, I would like to state that bullying is very prevalent in the world today, and it must be stopped. Bullying can result in physical and academic problems. I would like to share some facts you may or may not know about bullying. Did you know over 3.2 million students are victims of bullying each year? We have to lower that number. There have been 74 school shootings in the past 18 months. 160,000 students in the U.S. stay home every day because of bullying. There are 3 types of bullying. Verbal, this type of bullying involves name-calling. The second one is physical, fighting. The third one is cyberbullying. That's texting, email, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Bullying can happen anywhere to anybody. Many people believe that bullying only happens at school. I know plenty of adults that will testify that bullying even happens between adults in the workplace. If we work together, we can stop bullying. I'm in. Are you? Thank you, Damona Daniels, for talking to us about your book, Bully Me No More. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Now, the first question is, how old are you, and what grade are you in?
I am 11 years old, and I am in the 5th grade.
Okay. What made you decide to write Bully Me No More?
I wanted to inspire people to know that bullying is wrong and that you should always try to stand up to that person, or you should always try to tell a teacher or teacher, parent, or someone you trust.
What do you think about the lives lost because of bullying?
I think people should be more educated about bullying, that bullying is wrong.
What do you think others should do to step up to help stop bullying?
I think they should tell a teacher, or they should tell a parent or someone they trust to help that person.
Do you think schools should do more to stop bullying?
Yes, I think schools should do more to stop bullying. For example, no recess, see a counselor, or school suspension.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your book?
My book is about bullying.
Okay. What's your favorite part of the book?
My favorite part of the book is Hand of Hope.
Okay. Why do you think bullies bully people?
Because I think they were bullied before, or I think they were just scared.
What would you say to that girl or boy who's getting bullied? What would you tell them to do?
I would say don't be afraid. Try to stand up to that person, or if you're not feeling comfortable about that, always tell a teacher, parent, or someone you trust.
Okay, now do you know anybody or any of your friends, any family members that have been bullied?
No, not really, but I know I've been bullied before, but I did stand up to that bully.
Okay, can you tell me one of the situations when you were, how you handled it?
That bully, he was, that bully was talking to me and keep messing with me and calling me names, and I yelled out loud and I said, "Leave me alone." And the teacher heard me, and the teacher said, "What was wrong?" And I said that bully was messing with me.
Now, what do you think some of the children today get picked on about with bullying? I know a lot of people get picked on about how they look or what they're wearing. What do you think?
I think that probably because the way they're dressed, or because what they do, what they like, and that bully might not like, and they say that is ugly, or that's terrible, or something like that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Daniels, for writing the book. I think you are the youngest author I've ever met. I think you are on the right track, too. Please keep it up. Thank you for talking to us and taking matters into your own hands. We need more young people like you to ensure progress in our future. Thank you again. I am Paige Dews, and this has been BYSN, the news segment of award-winning Bowie Youth Showcase. I hope our audience at home and around the world will join in with us to help stop bullying. See you next time.
Once again, we would like to thank our guest, Maka Taylor, a social entrepreneur whose campaign to fight racial disparity and talk about race will empower our community and hopefully bring us closer to racial equality, and Ms. Damona Daniels, the author of Bully Me No More. We hope our audience at home has enjoyed today's show. See you next time.
I love taking care of my mom. It wasn't easy at first. She learned how to better communicate her needs.
And you learned how to not ignore yours.
I discovered how to make healthier meals.
And I discovered how much I enjoyed them.
Becoming a caregiver is a learning experience for everyone. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.